Well, hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Barriers and Boundaries Resilience Leadership Podcast. I know it's a mouthful. I'm your host, DB, and we're talking about healthy employees creating healthy organizations. And today I have a very special guest, Dr. Mark Gregory Karras. How are you doing today?
Great to be here. Doing awesome. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Good to have you on the show, and an author, licensed marriage family therapist, but just a lot of conversations that we could have about how to be healthy. I know you've done a lot of work with trauma, addressing trauma. I love the book Divine Echoes that you wrote in the past, and you got one out now, a new one out, Beyond Fairy Tales, and I want to read the subtitle so I don't mess it up.
Sure.
A couple's guide to finding clarity, doing the work, and building a lasting relationship.
Nice.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And I'll kind of let you, talk about the book a bit, but man, it's good to see you. How are you? How's everybody doing?
Yeah, doing great in sunny San Diego. Yeah, busy. Private practice is great, so I'm mostly doing that. Workshops on occasion, and some podcasts and talks and stuff. So it's really cool. Yeah, I get to talk about things I'm passionate about, both the couples work, relationships, which we'll probably talk about today, and religious trauma and religious spiritual concerns and issues. And so, yeah, those are two passions that really filling up my schedule lately.
So talk to me about Beyond Fairy Tales. Was that something that just came out of your work, counseling? How did
Yeah.
that develop for you?
Well, I've had a passion for couples therapy for quite some time. So I think the last, maybe 14 years, really diving into being all the trainings and books and, relationship gurus. Just, I got bit by the bug. And so specializing in couples therapy has been a passion of mine for a while. And this book just came out of the notion of I just want to write something that I wish all my clients had before they came to therapy or even as they're in therapy with me. But it's, resonated with a lot of colleagues and folks from all over the world. So really grateful, and just getting into some of the themes of attachment theory and neuroscience and communicating effectively and getting beyond some of the fairy tales and the myths that are embedded in our cultures, sometimes our family culture, sometimes our spiritual communities, and to something that feels a bit more mature, healthy, and reasonable given our time in which we live.
I'm curious about, I'm curious about the attachment theory and kind of explaining some of that. But there was a line in the book where you talked about the negative cycles, and not your spouse is the true
Uh,
enemy. Can you
mm-hmm.
kind of elaborate more some on that?
Yeah. So these negative cycles, and this is really informed by what's called emotionally focused therapy, one of the most empirically validated approach to couples work. But it's this notion that there there's the enemy of your relationship, and it's not your partner. And it sounds so different for folks because many times they come in thinking that their partner is the villain, is the problem, and hey doc, fix them. As opposed to, I do agree that there is agency and there's dance moves that both are usually doing that's not effective to secure functioning relationships. However, we do know that there are these negative cycles that sort of take a life of their own. And there are these entrenched patterns that result from, let's say, wired in relational tendencies or attachment styles or operating systems. And along with other cumulative effects of unmet relational longings and unclear signals, reactive emotions, and often unprocessed pain. And after sort of manifesting numerous times, they become patterns that often become like a powerful snowball rolling down a hill and gaining a life of their own and really harming the relationship. And in couples work, where there's a shift in the couples work is when both start to say, wow, the negative cycle is starting to kick our ass today. And many will externalize the cycle and give it a name. Uh, the volcano is here. It sort of signals to their partner like, oh my gosh, we're about to get caught in the same song and dance that we've been getting caught in for the last how many years. As I'm naming it, can we pause? Because I don't want to get sucked into this, babe. And if we keep going in this direction, it's really going to get the best of us. And so being able to name it, externalize it, and come together as a couple is really some powerful shifts in the relationship.
Yeah, I was drawn to the finding clarity aspect of it all. It seems like one of the barriers to that's maybe hard to get over is just creating that space that you talked about just then. There's like, hey,
Mm.
let's take a pause. Let's give ourselves room to analyze this. Is that a right kind of framing for that? Or
Yeah, to take a step back, to be mindful, to ask like transformers more than meets the eye, and what's actually happening in our relationship and these moments that feel so terrible. One can feel, alone, another frustrated and disconnected. What is really going on? And I think one of the beauty of this approach is to really take a step back, be mindful, and really explore the negative cycle and look at the anatomy of the negative cycle. And that's a whole different piece of it because you have the cycles, and there are some common ones. A typical one in some circles, it's called pursue withdraw cycle, but I call it in my book pull back and protest. It's
hmm,
typically when somebody, and I'll be direct here, it's usually men, not always, where they're typically start to withdraw or disconnect or be in their own world. And their partner will be like, hey, maybe they'll stop poking or criticizing. But really, underneath that is a deep desire to connect. But the man just sees that as some nagging, critical woman, and he goes even farther away. But the more he withdraws, the more she pursues, and the more she pursues, the more he withdraws, thus creating this cycle. And it's sort of a lose lose game. But there's other cycles, but that's one of the main ones. But it's really interesting as we unpack the anatomy of the cycle, because if you could press the pause button in the midst of that battle between you and your partner. And remember, it is kind of a battle from a neuroscience perspective because typically our threat systems are activated, which is why we can perceive our partner as really the enemy in that moment. But if we could pause, there's components to it. There's the triggers, there's the emotions, the longings beneath the emotions, the behaviors, the things that we're doing
hmm.
verbally, non-verbally. There's relationship based negative narratives, these narratives that we have about our partners every time we get sucked into this negative dance. And there's sometimes contextual factors.
Yeah, contextual, I think, in terms of what they have experienced from their parents' relationship or seeing other couples. Have
Mm.
you seen that have much of an impact on how couples live out their own marriages?
Well, for me, that's getting into, yeah, potentially two different topics in the sense that with contextual factors, there could be, sure, family of origin issues that are showing up. When in doubt, mommy and daddy wounds. I've got plenty of them. There also can be other contextual factors in the present that have nothing to do with that. For example, a couple who could be really going at it, but there's no talk about, let's say, a hypothetical story. Well, I've seen many of them. Let's say a guy lost his job and super stressed, doesn't really talk about it, feeling a lot of shame, a little bit of existential stuff going on. But some people can just look at their fights as just something between them without getting into the contextual issues. Another contextual issue may be I'm seeing a bunch of women with menopause. And that would be another contextual issue that could be really affecting the couple, both on obviously on an individual level for the woman, but really the relationship as well. And you can put, other kind of contextual factors too. But you brought up family of origin stuff. That's a really powerful one for sure.
I noticed you talked about empathy a lot in the book as well.
Yeah.
It feels that's that connecting piece of, all right, we're going to create this space, but let's approach it with this sense of empathy
Mm.
as we engage. Um,
Yeah. I always look at couple in partner behaviors through a lens of empathy, compassion. I have what I call in the book reflective empathic compassion.
Hmm.
And sort of it's this notion of exploring our partner's inner and outer experiences with a beginner's mind, sensitively tuning into their feelings on an embodied level, and thoughtfully offering care and comfort that truly align with their unique needs and desires. I think it's a game changer to be able to do that. I think it's very much operational in the honeymoon phase
Hmm.
when it's all about, I want you and need you and can't live without you and what's going on in your world and how can I help? And but it sort of gets lost at some point. But it is the secret sauce of really being able to slow down, reflect on our partner's inner world, empathize, and connect in a way that really feels life giving and really fills our partner's love tank. So I think that's really a game changer for me. Yeah.
That kind of curiosity, would you say that's one of the things that you've seen couples do well? Do you get a lot of, hey, we're in a great place, we want to do better? Or is it a lot more of, hey, we're experiencing
Yeah.
some trials
Yeah.
that we want to help get help with?
I would say most, well, the research shows that most couples come in when it's too late. They probably should have came in earlier. I get a few couples that are in a good place and want to get to a great place. Most couples are at a very distressed place and, either something's going to happen or change or they're going to get divorced, it seems. So, but, I'll get the folks who just want to work on communication, but I do a lot of affair work and trauma work with couples. So that can get really intense. But I would say curiosity is something that is so foreign that it's an epidemic. I mean, I don't see partners being
Oh, that's
curious. That's,
fascinating. Yeah.
yeah, because curiosity, I mean, listen, if there's a conflict, if there's conflictual patterns, people, I'm human too. We, like I said, we're in a threat state. It becomes about protecting ourselves. The defenses come up, the walls come up. Curiosity isn't our first go to. It's more of how can I protect myself? How can I withdraw? How can I poke or pursue? Or other things which are probably not very healthy. So curiosity gets lost when we're in a threat state. That's the bottom line. When we're in a caregiving state, see, we all have a threat state, but neuroscience also shows that we have a caregiving system. And we can make sense of that. Like if there was a kid who was crying and we feel this pull to one, like, oh man, how can I help? Oh, this poor kid. That's our caregiving system coming online. It's rare for the caregiving system to come online when we're having conflicts with our partner. But the caregiving system online enables us to be more curious. And so I wish all couples would be curious. But that's when we're like, hey, babe, what's going on? I know you're frustrated with me, and I just really want to know why. I love you. I care about you. I just get more of, what's your problem? Like, get off my back. Like, why are you always bringing up problems in our relationship? I don't get a lot of curiosity, but that's part of our task is to foster a space where curiosity can be more likely.
Yeah. And I've said it numerous times, even on this podcast, when I talk about leadership,
Mm,
curiosity is my favorite leadership characteristic. That
yeah.
if I have a boss or manager, I want them to be curious, not just about their employees, but about the vision of the organization or where they're headed. Is it
Yes.
hard to bring up a vision for the marriage when
Mm.
they can only see this problem right in front of what they're dealing with?
Well, you brought up an interesting point about being a boss, being a CEO. I work with a lot of CEOs
Mm.
and managers, but I love the fact that you're emphasizing curiosity. And it's so interesting that what I'm sharing with couples is also true for people in that position. Because a lot of CEOs and people who are in the workplace who are over other people, their threat systems are also activated because they're in a usually a stressful environment where they have to produce at some level, which creates this sense of, hey, stuff has to get done. I'm not going to sit with you for, even 10 minutes seems like a long time. And hey, Jason, I know that I haven't seen you been producing as much as last month. And, I'm not here to, beat you up or anything. I'm just, what's going on in your life? What's going on? Just curious. I just find it so hard because they're like, I got another boss above me needing for me to produce, and I don't need to do all this emotional, stuff. But it's so important to have that human relational level in the workplace if if you do it.
I thought it was fascinating. That was one of the curiosity piece being one of the first things to go when that threat sensor goes off in the
Right.
brain.
Good reason. It makes sense.
Hmm.
Because when it goes off, it's geared for self-protection. It's an evolutionary, adaptation to make sure we're keeping ourselves from pain. And makes a lot of sense. That's how our brains are wired. But then there's the task as people in the workforce and over other people and even in our relationships. We don't want to be bound to our animalistic evolutionary threat system. We want to, serve the other parts of us, which maybe are in line with more values of who we actually want to be, whether it's under a spiritual umbrella or a sense of that's just not who I want to be and it's not my value system. And so I love that piece of it too of who do I want to be in the workplace? Who do I want to be in my marriage? And how can I live in alignment with my values even though circumstances, or even in this case, my spouse, may be doing something that's driving me crazy.
Have you seen any connection between those who are good at goal setting with being resilient in their relationship? What are things that you've seen that have really kind of helped them stay resilient? Is it focusing on the patterns and the
Mhm.
behaviors?
Sure. I think there's a whole bunch of things that can foster resilience in a relationship. And when we're talking about resilience, it's just shared capacity of partners to navigate stress, conflict, and adversity by really maintaining and strengthening their emotional bond. Right. So it's who we are and what we're doing before that stress really comes onto our plate. And so there are many things that we can think about, whether it's effective communication, conflict resolution skills, emotion regulation, secure attachment. But you're bringing up what I would call shared goals and values. And I think, of course, that would be a powerful buffer against the stressors that we can face as couples. And I'll be honest, not every couple has that conversation of who are we? What are our values together as individuals and as a couple? What are our priorities? What are our life goals that really bring us a sense of unity and purpose that ultimately, you're right, will help us navigate adversity much more effectively? So I think a shared vision, and I'm open to diversity. It's okay to be different people with some different values, but can we at least come together on some things that are really important, whether it's stating an agreed upon, like, some people, even couples write contracts like this is who we are. Some people have like on their wall sort of our vision statement as a couple, which is kind of cute, or this is our family values, and they'll have a list of maybe 5 to 10 values. But again, it's saying who we are as a couple, and not a lot of couples even go there. It's not something they even thought about, but it creates such a resilient factor. This is who we are. This is our family. This is what we're about. This is what we're after. This is our 5 year goals. This is our 10-year plan. And of course, that can create a lot of resilience.
Yeah, and also you include some like material where they can work through together in
Mm,
the book as well. Uh,
yeah.
why is that important?
Well, I'm kind of one who says information does not necessitate transformation. So I wanted to make a lot of stuff in the book practical. Well, hence part of the title, Doing the Work. It's not just about reading, it's taking information. It's about doing and putting this stuff into practice. And I get it. Books, even I as an author can acknowledge books can only go so far. But I did create some handouts and worksheets for couples to be able to do together. A couple of discussion questions to sit down and maybe read through a chapter and kind of just talk about some of the questions that I'm posing to help them go deeper, understanding each other as individuals and as a couple. And so, yeah, that was really important for me.
And with this being barriers and boundaries, working together is a good boundary to put in place for a relationship. I kind of look at boundaries as like doors, not necessarily like walls, but just something that's like, hey, look, let's go into therapy for a little bit, and then you can come right back and get on the path.
Mm,
What are some healthy boundaries? You talked a lot about that in the book, but if there's one or two, this is a great place to start when you're trying to
yeah.
establish a healthy relationship or recover from trauma in a relationship.
So it reminds me of sort of the interconnection of values and boundaries in the sense of one is this governing principle that we both come first, that we both are the most important people in our universes. And if you're spiritual, fine, put God on top. At the same time, making sure that who we are as partners. Stan Tacken talks about a couple bubble, like nothing, we won't let anything come in to steal, to kill, to destroy the secure relationship that we have, you know? And I think that as a governing principle is really important. Whether it's what's called bringing in thirds, other people that may get into the mix and become an obstacle to secure relationships. It could be a family member, it could be a colleague at work who's kind of in some ways threatening the security of the relationship and maybe talking, let's say hypothetically, talking bad about one partner, or let's say one partner is spending more time with somebody at work than they are their own relationship. The governing principle of we will come first, and that comes even with kids. And I know that's really hard because sometimes some couples I meet with, they're lucky they have 10 minutes a night to connect because of how frenetic and fast-paced life is. But can we agree that we are putting each other first? That every day we're asking the question, gosh, what is going on in my partner's world and how can I love them well? I just think that is a basic principle of really honoring and keeping our relationship at the forefront of our existence is so powerful. And then other boundaries or really values in that way of, hey, we're going to communicate in a respectful way. There's no FUs and throwing out the big guns or even the using the D word. I mean, I think that's sort of a missile to the heart when partners continue to bring up, well, I'm going to leave you ass then, or I'm just going to divorce you. And all that does is continue to erode trust. So to come together as a partnership and say, hey, can we just agree that, yeah, we're not going to always like really like each other, but can we agree to not be mean and really use that harsh, derogatory, dehumanizing language towards one another? That would be another example.
I love you, but I don't like you right now.
Hey, that's honest. Yeah, and you bring up another point. I love inviting couples to, even when they're angry,
Yeah.
to say, hey, I love you, but I'm freaking angry right now. And if we continue this conversation, I know I will be self at worst and not self at best. And so I need to just, I just need to cool off. So if you give me an hour and then we'll kind of revisit this conversation, that's under the umbrella of what's called a healthy timeout in our field. And then I can come back to the table. So I love putting the love front and center. Like I could
Yeah.
be angry at you, but I love you still. I don't want you ever to think I don't love you. But I could be angry and not want to be in your presence for a little bit, but I still love you.
And that's a good empathetic way, I think, to approach it, as you talked about
Yeah.
earlier. Premarital counseling,
Mm.
pre-marriage, I think it's important to highlight just the weight that your partner carries in your life. They have the ability to go for the jugular. You
Mm.
talked about using the D word or just the
Hmm.
things that's going to cut into, because you become so vulnerable in a relationship. Hopefully
Yeah.
you become
Right, right,
vulnerable.
right. Yeah.
Right.
Hopefully by the time you get married,
Yeah.
but it's not always the case. You're right.
That's
Yeah.
not always the case, but just how important it is just to recognize that the person sitting next to you could hurt you more than anybody has ever hurt you because of that vulnerability.
Yeah.
You-
Totally. I mean, there's no other person on the planet that can trigger you like your partner. But why is that the case? Because they are one of the most important and powerful people in your universe. I mean, it's just the bottom line. If Joe Schmo said, well, I'm not going to talk to you then. It's like, okay. But when
Deuces.
your partner says that, it's like our threat system comes online and it feels dangerous. And I've worked with people in the military, and there's a lot of things that don't scare some people, but it's remarkable how when you get past the defenses of actually how they feel when their partners is kind of leaving them or just steps out of the house because they're so angry, to be able to soften and say, that scares the shit out of me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm a grown man. I'm 250 pounds of pure muscle. But man, when my wife, she leaves, and for some reason, I kind of panic inside. I didn't even know, but thanks, Doc, for telling me what anxiety is. But I feel this anxiety, and I don't feel okay inside. And it's scary. It's scary. And then when you slow it down even further, and they might say something like, when I think about it, this is how I felt when my mom would leave and when my parents would fight and she would go away and I wouldn't see her for a day. And that's when some more vulnerable material comes up. And it's really, really vulnerable what goes on underneath the hood of our hearts.
Mm. That's good stuff, man. A lot of insights, a lot of great. It was a great book, great work in doing this, and I appreciate you, one,
Yeah.
writing it and getting it
Thanks.
out there. But definitely
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on the show today to talk about it. Best way for listeners, viewers to connect with you, learn more about you.
Sure. Well, my website, markgregorykarras.com. A little bit of a social media dinosaur, but Facebook, a little bit of Instagram. And then I have a YouTube channel where I'm creating some videos for relationships and religious trauma as well.
Yeah, I saw some of those. Good work on those, man.
Thanks.
Definitely tune into those, and I'll put the links in there. Go from
Wonderful.
there. But man, I
Yeah.
appreciate you, and it's good to see
Yeah.
you. And
You too. Thanks for the conversation. Loved it.
yeah, we'll keep fighting a good fight, man. We'll keep pushing it.
Sounds great. See you soon.
All right, my friends, another great show. This time with Dr. Karras. Shout out to Mark. Thank you so much for stopping by and joining us today. But hopefully, you've been able to look beyond the fairy tales and actually identify with maybe something that's you've been thinking about in your own relationship, but you just didn't know how to articulate it. So go buy the book, read it, talk about it with each other, make it a date night, have dinner and just converse about it. And in a way that really is just dynamic in your own relationship style. This doesn't have to be a static thing where it's like, okay, you do this, now you do that. No, just make it about your relationship in a way that you express your love for one another. Keep love at the center. Let's start with love. Let's start with why you're together, but really just creating that environment where you have an opportunity to have space to analyze, to think through, and not just go off your gut reaction and feelings and emotions, but acknowledge what those are and learn from those, what those are. All of that stuff and more is in his book. So go buy it. And I encourage you to keep fighting the good fight for your health, for your well being, for your relationships. And if you need anything, don't hesitate to contact me as well. I'm here for you, and I want you to be a resilient person. I want you to have a resilient marriage. And I thank you so much for watching, for listening, for sharing, and all that good stuff. But it really is about you being resilient and moving forward with a good sense of health and well-being. So we'll keep fighting the good fight. And until next time, EB out here.